My name is Steve Hernandez, and I'm the Executive Director of the Legislature's Nonpartisan Commission on Women, Children, Seniors, Equity, and Opportunity. We are here today to continue our ongoing conversations that we are hosting on the contributions and experiences of the Black community, the African American community, not only to the fabric of the state of Connecticut, but to the fabric of this country and this planet. I'm especially excited for today's conversation. I'm going to call it a celebration because I think that all too often we don't talk about mental health in the context of resilience and the context of healing, especially in communities of color. So I'm excited to have this dynamic panel of contributors, professionals, experts in the field going to be sharing their stories, their hearts, and their advice on how it is that we can promote resilience, the role of healing in empowering the Black community. Without anything further, I'm just going to name each of our panelists for tonight. When each of you introduces yourselves, your image will come to the fore. Please think of tonight as a fireside conversation. I really want us to be in a healing and relaxed space. We're joined. Next, we have Chevelle Moss Savage. Chevelle is owner, consultant, and therapist of HEAL LLC. Chevelle, I'd love for you to introduce yourself and just tell us a little bit about why you think this conversation is important to have tonight.
Well, I guess if I unmute myself, you will be able to hear me, right? So, yes, thank you so much for having me here. I'm so excited. Oh my gosh, Kelvin, I had no idea that I needed that respite, child. Lord have mercy. Thank you. I appreciate that. And Mitzi, thank you for just opening up and just talking about the DSM component. I've always said that the DSM definitely will pathologize all of Black and brown folks and will immediately put them in a space where they really should not be, just because you need to have a diagnosis, you need to have medication, you need to have all of these things. But anyway, I could be on my soapbox about that for a whole nother conversation, y'all. But anywho, and I love what you shared as well as Shanara. But my name is Chevelle Moss Savage. I'm so excited to be here. I have a local practice in downtown New London in the same building as Janelle. So we are neighbors. And my practice primarily supports folks who identify as LGBTQ, non-binary, non-monogamous couples, poly, kink, all of those great things that we talk about, and also provide support and resources for folks who are navigating all of those intersecting identities as well. One of the things that I want to bring tonight is just more awareness around what that looks like to be Black, LGBTQ, as well as some of the stigmas that we have to navigate around being Black and LGBTQ, some of the rumors, some of the things that are not true, some of the ingrained stigmas, some of the internalized things that we have to navigate, and the importance of having a therapist who understands what that looks like, the importance of reaching out for support in those areas as well. And one thing that you said, Mitzi, and with that in the DSM, did you know that up until 1973, homosexuality was considered a mental health diagnosis? When that actually, the only thing that is listed in the medical diagnosis is actually when it comes to any type of gender identity or gender dysphoria, is gender dysphoria, and that's specifically for our trans and non-binary folks, and usually that's for them to get medically affirming procedures. And so that's what that looks like. But also that carries a stigma as well. It says that you are broken, right? And what does that look like? So anyway, so that is why I am here. I'm so excited to be a part of the conversation, and I welcome learning and growing with all of y'all tonight.
Chevelle, thank you so much. As you may know, the Commission is the administrative chair of the LGBTQ plus Health and Human Services Network in the state of Connecticut. And on this next week, we're going to be launching a survey of all of our communities around the state. And you are going to be one of our agents to help get that survey in all of the right hands, just to make sure that we have full participation from our communities of color. You know, it's striking to me that our LGBTQ populations are difficult to find because there's fear and there is stigma, and we are often quiet. And even for those in our communities who have been able to find their voice and find their space in community, oftentimes they are forced to go back into the closet when they age and when they become our elders. So these are important issues that impact mental health and well-being. So thank you for raising that up and for bringing that to us. Chevelle, as part of the work that we do with our LGBTQ plus kids, but also as part of the work that we do with our state suicide, anti-suicide and suicide prevention work, we know that there are several factors from different pressure points that are really honing in on our LGBTQ plus kids, and especially those kids of color, whether they be cultural, and I can attest to that, whether it's cultural, whether it's societal, whether it's the age that some of these kids are. It is developmentally appropriate to be developing, and all of the complexities that come with that. So I wonder, Chevelle, in working with young people that are LGBTQ plus, what do you do in your work to help build that sense of agency, but also that space of safety that so many of our kids need?
So thank you for that question. Actually, I'm not originally from Connecticut. I don't know if you can tell from my accent. You will hear it when I say y'all in Karen Zone. But about 2 years ago, I migrated up here. My spouse got a job at Connecticut College, and so I migrated 2 years ago up here. And so when I'm bringing that up is that when I was in Virginia, I specifically worked with Black and brown folks, as well as Black and brown LGBTQ youth and Black and brown LGBTQ adults. Up here, I don't see youth, but I still do see LGBTQ Black and brown adults. And I think one of the things that I've noticed that is important to provide a safe space or a soft spot to land is representation. And so when I worked at Virginia State University in the counseling center, one of the things that I knew that I needed to be was to be out. I was the only Black um, LGBTQ identified faculty. Now, you may say that's interesting because Virginia State University is a huge school, and it is. I was the only out one. There were plenty of other folks who identified as LGBTQ who attended and who actually worked there, but didn't feel safe being out because of tenure track and what that looked like and the stigma that comes with that, or because they knew how some of the things, how they were going to be treated. Because although it's not a faith-based school, Virginia is a Bible Belt, honey. And so like, we are right there. All right. We are like, and when I'm coming into this space, I'm talking about two things that people don't want to talk about. I'm talking about Black mental wellness, and I'm talking about LGBTQ identities. And so, and one of the things that helps me do that is being able to have conversations and educate folks. At the end of the day, I created my practice because my mom died over 18 years ago suddenly. And so on my own mental wellness journey, I sought out a therapist, right? So I found someone who could affirm me being Black, or who could affirm me being queer or lesbian, but not could affirm me being both. And so that's why HEAL was created, because I'm not monolithic. I am not one being. I have all of these intersecting identities. I'm a mom, I'm a gaga, I'm a wife, I'm a mother, I'm all these things, right? And so I needed someone to be able to understand all the things. So if I'm talking to my therapist about what's going on and I say my big mama, and I have to break it down because you don't look like me, it's like, well, what's a big mama? That's my grandmama, honey. Or if I'm saying that I'm going to a cookout is a barbecue. Whereas in, some of the other Black therapists were like, well, are you sure you understand about this lesbian thing? So the thing that ingrained stigma and what that looks like, and education is important. And because the suicide rates are so very high when it comes to our Black and brown LGBTQ youth, especially our trans and non-binary youth, I think one of the things that we need to focus on is that we always are showing up and understanding that we need to constantly be educating ourselves on what is necessary to support them, right? Even when it comes to language, let me tell you something. Therapists, this is for y'all. When someone comes into the space and Don't take that opportunity to use that particular person and their identity as gay Google, okay? I'm gonna need you to figure it out. When they leave out, do your own research and figure out how you can support them. Don't ask them questions because you just want to know, not because it's helpful or that it's therapeutic. So I think that one of those things that we have to understand is that you need representation, you need education, you need to understand the cultural nuances of what that looks like, right? As far as I know, I'm not really sure, but I know I was a unicorn in Virginia. I was the only Black queer therapist in Virginia. And up here, it's even more of a unicorn, right? Because of the racial dynamic of where I live, as well as some of the, folks that I serve. And so I think representation is important, Stephen. I also think that understanding the nuances, the cultural components of that is important as well.
Chevelle, thank you so much for that. First of all, I'm also a transplant. I'm a Texan, so I know how to spell and use the word y'all.
That's
But
fine. It's inclusive.
another thing, I'm also as a fellow unicorn, I can tell you that it is so critically important what you said about there's no one size fits all. And I am not monolith. I am a coming together of experiences, identities, and outcomes that are ever evolving. That is what I am. And that means that the beauty of our helping each other heal is in the getting to know each other in our complexity and honoring that complexity. How often, Chevelle, have you heard and seen those training videos where they're teaching us how to be more culturally competent, and they're actually just teaching us what to say and what not to say in a particular situation?
Exactly.
It's offensive. It's offensive.
Exactly.
And it doesn't, and it's offensive not in its own right, but because it doesn't really take into account the diversity and the singularity of human experience. So thank you, Chevelle. I want to come back to you because I always think of our LGBTQ plus community as a canary in the mine in a lot of ways, because oftentimes those impacts, those big societal impacts, fall extra heavy on the marginalized among us. So can you just give us a little bit of your experience and your understanding of the impact of these dual pandemics in the last few months on the LGBTQ plus community?
Yes, thank you so much for that, Stephen. Absolutely. So, when the national unrest happened with the first of all the pandemic and then the racial unrest and all of that on top of that, it was a lot, and so it definitely does impact folks who are underrepresented in a definitely a different way because of just them having access to those resources. So, example, I have trans folks who wanted to be a part of Black Lives Matter protests, right? And so they would march and we would have to have safety conversations around like if when you get to a situation where you may or may not be arrested, have you talked to your cisgender allies about a plan? Because basically I know what your name is. I know what your gender identity is. But right now, because you don't have the resources, your license says a different thing. And they will put you in general population with a gender that you do not identify with, which could mean literally you die. So even having those basic conversations around that and people not understanding and recognizing that, or a lot of folks, like I work with college folks. I work with Eugene O'Neill or the National Theater Institute. I love the thespians, and so I do a lot of work with them. And so they had to send everybody home, right? And so a lot of the students that I work with, they are working, when they come and talk to me, Chevelle, they are their most authentic, unicorn, vibrant, bright self. I will affirm you from head to toe, honey. But at the end of the day, right now you're a Scott, but you are about to be Sophia when you go back home because you have to go back in the closet because of the veil of secrecy, because of all of the things that you have to navigate, right? Because you're not out. to your parents. You're not out to your family. You're not out to anybody else. So what does that look like? So now that's another touch of mental health that you have to navigate, right? And if you don't already have a therapist who understands what that looks like, understands those components, that's the thing. Another component is, what about when you actually were planning to leave? I have folks that I was working with who was planning to leave the situation because of intimate partner violence or domestic violence. Now you are stuck in a space with your abuser and you have nowhere to go because maybe you're a frontline worker and you no longer are considered essential. That's racist right there. Who gets to tell me if I'm essential or not? Anyway, um, so there are so many things that you have to navigate with that, right? And what about folks who identify as trans or non-binary? And the simplest thing that you can do to affirm these people, right, and affirm folks, and it's free, is go by their chosen name. So they want you to call them Tree, call them Tree. Well, how is that hurting you, right? What is the problem? However, you now are back home living with your parents who have a very strong faith system, who don't believe in trans, who don't believe in LGBTQ, who don't believe in therapy, right? And say that you need to pray that demon out of you. So now you are back in the closet. You are being misgendered because they're no longer calling you your pronouns that you want. They're now he and you really are a she, right? They're actually dead naming you, calling you a name that you don't identify with, which is violent. So all of these things affect the LGBTQ community differently and impact their mental health differently. And so that's why it is so important to have a therapist or a support system who can affirm you. I have clients who were like, well, Ms. Chevelle, I can't be home and I know I'm supposed to shelter in place. So I have to go to this place, go to a friend's house, which now I may have COVID, which now, and COVID is like, it's like the Scarlet Sea, honey, because you associate a medical diagnosis with behavior characteristics. Okay. And it's just like having an STI. If you raise your hand and say, hey, how many people have a cold? You raise your hand. How many people have an STI? You know, nobody wants to admit that. But at the end of the day, these are some of the things that we have to navigate. So you're talking intimate partner violence. You're talking going back in the closet. You're talking I can no longer work. I can't go to school. I'm actually, at home with family who don't affirm me, who don't accept me. What does that do for your mental health? I know my practice has surged because of that. And unfortunately, Stephen, I'm going to always have a job because there are always going to be people who are ugly and mean and don't want to support and affirm folks who identify as LGBTQ.
Thank you so much for that, Chevelle. And each of you is a healer. Each of you is a public servant. And I'm just so grateful to have been able to share this time with you and you sharing the gift of your expertise, the gift of your knowledge, your intimate understanding of community, of individuals, and of that life force that really flows between us that I call healing. And I want to give each of you an opportunity to share a parting expression, a parting word, um, something to close our evening. Chevelle.
Yes. Once again, thank you for moderating this wonderful panel, Stephen, and thank you, Denise, for putting this together. This was so great. I learned so much from each and every one of you. So one of the things that I would like to end with is a thing that I tell my clients is that setting boundaries is necessary, especially when we're dealing with a pandemic, right? A lot of times folks will say, oh, I have such a big heart. I'm like, sis, bruh, they, them, you don't, you don't have, you have boundary issues. So anyway, so leave me with that, okay? We're not doing that today. Not with Miss Chevelle. I'm gonna tell it like it is, therapist, okay? So, one of the quotes that Audre Lorde has, and I love it, is that self-care is not self-indulgent. It is not selfish. It is an act of political warfare. All right, it is necessary. It is necessary for our survival. Also, You need to name it so you can tame it, honey. So listen, if you don't have anybody that you can actually talk to, such as a therapist, get you a therapist. It is nothing wrong with a therapist, all right? Because you can't tame something if you're not naming it. And I'm not saying that you need to be diagnosed because I'm not on team diagnosis, all right? So, but at the end of the day, there is and if you can't afford, and that's another thing, if you can't afford therapy, there are also resources that you can. And a couple of things that came up. Janelle mentioned it. Shanara mentioned it. Um, it is a shame that people feel that they cannot ask questions because of the kind of insurance that they have. Okay. So I'm going to put it out there. So if you have Husky, all right, if you have the state Medicaid, you deserve the same level of care as someone who has Anthem. All right. You need to understand that. And you also need to challenge your therapist. If some things are not right, some things are not right. Listen, I had to fire my therapist because you didn't understand what I was going through in regards to my cultural background. So it's okay. It is all right. That's what you need to do. And so with that, I say thank you again for having this. This was so great. I really enjoyed it. And there are always support systems out there. Also, if you are available to to find your therapist, that's fine. If not, get your support system, and I will end with that.
Thank you, Chevelle. So that we can take an industry of hurt and really make it an industry of healing with the motivation of healing. So I want to thank each and every one of you. As I said before, you never knew you needed something until you experienced that beautiful gift that is the gift of empathy and abundance that we can only see from each other. And for that, on behalf of our viewers and on behalf of the people of the state of Connecticut, I want to thank you and have a good night.